18 years ago, during a violent thunderstorm, a towering structure suddenly appeared in the heart of the city, accompanied by mysterious gates materializing in the streets. These gates, resembling blue funnels of energy, unleashed hordes of monsters that threatened the peace of the city's inhabitants. However, amidst the chaos, a small group of individuals with extraordinary abilities emerged to confront the monsters. These brave souls, armed and ready, were called players, and they quickly became humanity's last hope. With their arrival, the world saw the appearance of rare treasures, banknotes, and gold coin rain down from the sky, and players, with their newfound power, became symbols of wealth and envy. They were the envy of all, and their power was unparalleled. The scene shifts to the present day, where a young man stands in front of the guild office, a serious look on his face. Large bags are slung over his shoulders. Despite the chaos around him, he's not one of the chosen players. Inside, a well-dressed man in a sharp business suit gestures toward the table, urging him to put the food down. The young man smiles, apologizes for being late, and wishes everyone a pleasant meal. As he leaves the office, he steps onto the street, waiting for the traffic light to change. He sits on his moped and notices a large advertisement on one of the buildings. He removes the protective shield from his helmet to get a better look. The banner features a young player from South Korea, renowned for his unique abilities. The player can summon energy and use magic to repel enemies. The sight leaves the young man in awe. He couldn't help but think that this player, with his godlike powers, was something of a cheat code. As the ad plays out in his mind, the sound of a car horn interrupts his thoughts. The driver, impatient, shouts that the light is green and it's time to go. The young man quickly apologizes and drives off. The bright moon shines down on the night sky as he parks his moped near a lamppost. Nearby, a red mailbox catches his eye, overflowing with letters. With curiosity, he walks over and sifts through them. Unfortunately, among the bills and notices from school, there's no letter he had been hoping for. Sighing, he closes his eyes and murmurs to himself that he shouldn't have expected anything more. He heads inside, announcing his arrival. His younger sister steps out from a room and greets him, complimenting him on his hard work. She asks why he's still up, and he, slightly tired, responds by asking if their mother is asleep. The girl nods, saying their mother has fallen asleep and is resting better than usual. The siblings are relieved, knowing their mother's health is improving. The young man turns and heads toward his mother's room to give her a massage, a gesture of care he regularly performs. But his sister, holding a chocolate cake with the number 18 written on it, suddenly catches his attention. She beams, wishing him a happy birthday. The young man, surprised, asks where she got the money for the cake, especially since they had little to spare. His sister, smiling sheepishly, reveals that she had spent the money meant for clothes to buy it. She jokes that if he doesn't eat the cake, she'll take it for herself, explaining that she loves chocolate cakes and that this one came from a famous bakery. The young man is visibly upset, noticing how shabby his sister's clothes are. "Yuang," he calls, gently patting her on the head, thanking her for the thoughtful birthday cake. She laughs and suggests they read the letter first before diving into the cake. Taking the envelope from her hands, the young man notices a heart on it. Curious, he opens it. Inside, a single sheet of paper causes his eyes to widen in shock. His sister's grin grows wider as she bursts into laughter. The letter, an invitation to join the Players Association. The young man, stunned, felt his hands tremble. His eyebrows lifted in shock, and he was at a loss for words. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized he'd been invited to join the Players Association. Which was why she had pulled the invitation from the mailbox. She threw herself into her brother's arms, congratulating him with a smile. Overwhelmed, The young man mentally celebrated his success, his eyes glistening with tears. This was the opportunity he'd been waiting for, the chance to change their lives. His gaze shifted to his sick mother's room, his eyes filled with determination. The clouds covered the starry sky, signaling the arrival of a new day. The towering Korean Players Association building loomed over the city, and as the young man gazed at the skyscraper in awe, he closed his eyes and reminded himself that now was not the time to let emotions take over. Frowning, he realized this was only the beginning. The girl from the association smiled warmly, congratulating him. He smiled back shyly, thanking her. She then extended her hand, explaining that the player's information would appear if he said the words "information window." When he did, a status window popped up in front of him, displaying his name and the inscription "First Level." Noticing the question marks next to the unique abilities line, he asked what they meant. The girl raised her eyebrows in surprise, waving her hands in excitement. She congratulated him for having unique abilities and explained that the question marks indicated these abilities had not yet been revealed. In amazement, the young man gazed at his status window, his face lighting up with a broad smile. He couldn't believe it. He had unique abilities. His body shook with excitement. The girl beside him raised her hand joyfully, closing her eyes as she explained that the coach would soon arrive to provide more details. Hearing a voice behind her, the employee turned, expecting the coach to have arrived. But instead, standing in front of her was Soku, the man whose face adorned the advertising posters. The young man stared at him, wide-eyed and disbelieving. Furrowing his brows, Soku decisively asked to personally escort the young man into the organization, pointing at himself in disbelief. The young man asked if they were referring to him. The girl clasped her hands, and the experienced player explained that he had overheard their conversation. Looking at the new player, he added that the young man had unique abilities. The young man's face turned pale, his body shaking once again in shock. The employee explained that this wasn't exactly by the book, but with a smile and a wave of her hand, she reassured them that she would overlook it this time. Her authority, she said, was enough to make an exception. After all, she wasn't just any manager, she was a professional with 10 years of experience. The young man thanked her for her understanding, and the gates to the tower opened before them. Soku suggested they enter, and the young man's face grew serious as he followed. Entering the portal, the experienced player reassured his new colleague that there was not reason to worry. Just as the young man was about to ask something, he fell silent. A goblin sitting on the ground overheard their conversation, and soon a whole crowd of goblins had gathered in the forest in front of the portal. The young man, eyes wide with surprise, asked if it was common for there to be so many monsters on the first floor. With a straight face, Soku replied that sometimes complications would arise over time, causing monsters to accumulate in large numbers. The young player asked if this was a major issue. Gripping his sword, Soku explained that this situation actually worked in their favor. It would allow him to teach the basics more quickly. Soku then spoke about a test involving 100 goblins. Imagining monsters attacking a person, he explained that the results of the test were quite predictable, but it had been banned due to its danger. The test was designed for players below the 10th level to assess their abilities. Looking down, Soku elaborated that the test measured a player's potential if they could kill 100 goblins without using skills within a certain time frame. They passed. Once the timer ran out, Soku sprang into action, cutting down goblins with ease. As he fought, he explained that anyone who completed the task in 4 to 5 hours became an advanced player, while those who finished in 2 to 3 hours were ranked as level players. The blade swiftly cut through the goblins, severing their bodies and heads. The monsters, didn't have time to react before they fell. If someone completed the test in under an hour, it indicated they had high-ranking abilities. The young man, holding his sword, marveled at the speed, precision of his trainer's attacks. Remaining calm, Soku discussed the final ranking. For those with unique abilities, completing the task in just 10 minutes was the goal. The young man watched, awestruck, as Soku crushed a goblin's head with his bare hands, freezing the monster's body instantly. Jiku thought to himself, amazed by the sheer power of his trainer. He couldn't help but admire Soku's skill. Soku glanced at the timer and, satisfied, confirmed he had completed the test in just 47 seconds. Running up to him, the young man asked how he could possibly complete it in 10 seconds. Soku explained that what took ordinary players years to achieve, those with unique abilities could master in mere months. A violet flame of energy burned behind him as he spoke, emphasizing how their growth and potential were beyond imagination. Turning his attention to the frozen goblin, Soku asked if the young man had heard of the Angela Guild. Warriors, robed and armored, prepared their weapons for battle, and most of the guild members passed the goblin test in less than 3 hours. Soku, however, had plans to create a guild far superior to Angela's. Without turning around, he explained that to achieve this, they needed top-tier players, especially those with unique abilities. The young man, surprised, opened his mouth to speak. Soku then cast a spell on the ice-encased goblin, hoping that his new colleague would push his limits in the future. He believed that one day they would meet again in the tower. As the goblin thawed, Soku suggested they begin the first hunt of the young man's life. Soku advised the young man to tense his legs and back as the goblin charged at him, its broken teeth bared and its axe raised. The young player was told to seize the weapon with his gaze. With determination, he furrowed his brow, ready to change his life. 5 years later, the sun shone brightly over the forest at the first floor of the tower. A sword was swung, and the goblin recoiled in fear as the weapon came too close. A curly-haired man, wearing glasses, took notice of the scene, and the man with the axe apologized for being late. The swordsman turned, remarking that the delay allowed him to witness something amusing. The swordsman raised his weapon for another blow. The young man, Jiku, furiously clenched, his eyebrows ready to face the challenge. The sword struck the ground with a heavy thud. Its wielder exhaled sharply, his chest heaving. The armored man frowned, clearly disappointed by the outcome of the comeback challenge that had become so popular. The curly-haired man replied, acknowledging his own doubts. Jiku, stunned, opened his mouth wide and summoned an information window. A blue status window appeared before him, showing that at the age of 18 he had received an invitation from the Players Association. Lowering his head, the young man slammed his fists into the ground, screaming in frustration. The man in glasses spread his arms in amazement, while the tank, the warrior who had been observing, opened his mouth in disbelief. Despite having acquired unique abilities, Jiku still struggled. He was drenched in sweat, unable to comprehend how such players could exist. His status window still showed that he was level 1. Just then, a precise strike from the swordsman cleaved the attacking goblin in half. The monster's body collapsed to the ground, its weapon falling beside it. The swordsman let out a relieved sigh, and the squad stood amid the forest, surrounded by the corpses of their enemies. The leader praised his team for their excellent work. When asked if everyone had leveled up, the brunette squad member nodded. The man in the orange hoodie added that dealing with goblins had become much easier, noting that after only a few kills, his level had already risen. The young man smiled, remarking that raising a low level wasn't so difficult. He promised that squad they would ascend to the second floor the next day, and asked them to meet him at the entrance in the morning. The squad nodded in agreement, watching as the protagonist walked away. One of the team members asked if their guide was truly as famous as people said. Another responded, saying they had heard a lot about him. The squad leader picked up a glowing purple stone from the ground and, when asked about the guide's fame, closed his eyes, his face serious. "There are several rumors going around," he began, knitting his brows. "According to them, our guide is the owner of unique abilities." The brunette squad member's eyes widened in admiration, asking if it was true. The leader shook his head, explaining that it was only a rumor. Meanwhile, Jiku walked along the path, passing by the new squad members. One of them commented that if the rumors were true, their guide wouldn't still be stuck on the first floor. Smirking, the leader added, "According to rumors, he's in last place, out of everyone." Raising his eyebrows in surprise, the brunette asked if there was really a ranking below 2. Crossing his arms over his chest, the squad leader explained that their guide wasn't even a ranker, and while everyone loved to gossip, no one could deny it. Looking around, he added that the guide had earned a nickname among the players. The crowns of the trees cast a shadow across Jiku's back as he glanced to the side. He was known as the player who couldn't improve his level. Leaning against a tree, this was his secret. Place a secluded corner on the first floor where other players rarely ventured. It was a spot he came to every time after finishing his work as a guide. Turning his head, he noticed that, as usual, only one goblin appeared in the area. Today, however, the monster had materialized a bit too close. The young man drew his sword, realizing that even a quick and sneaky strike didn't guarantee an easy victory. The goblin stood with its back to him, holding a spear. Jiku silently began to sneak up on it, his steps small and quiet. The goblin remained unaware of the approaching threat, standing motionless. Jiku tightened his grip on his sword, sweat trickling down his tense face. The goblin, sensing something, suddenly turned around. The sword swung through the air, but the goblin managed to block the blow with its wooden spear. Jiku gritted his teeth, trying to break through the goblin's defense. The fight dragged on, as even a low-level goblin could resist a first-level player's attacks. Their weapons clashed, and Jiku struggled to push through. He clenched his teeth, realizing the battle was far from easy. The Players' Association building stood bathed in the light of the setting sun. As Jiku reflected on the time it had taken to defeat the goblin, an entire hour. Walking down the corridor of the guide department, he calculated how much he'd make if he sold the M crystal for 20.1 and subtracted the cost of the potion he had used. With a heavy sigh, he realized that he would make absolutely no profit. Suddenly, the door swung open in front of him, and a frustrated man named Theo walked out of the office. Looking at Jiku, Theo was asked if he had finished his work. He nodded in affirmation, but said nothing, his expression dissatisfied. When Jiku mentioned that he was working late, Theo tucked his hair behind his ear, his teeth clenched angrily. As he passed by his friend, he muttered an apology. Jiku entered the office and looked back at his colleague. Turning to the employee at the desk, he asked what had happened with Theo. The chief manager of the conductor department, Tessik, looked up from his work, ignoring Jiku's question. He then lowered his head, hand on his forehead, and explained that starting tomorrow, Theo would be handling the guests with whom Jiku had worked that day. Raising his eyebrows in shock, the young man asked why this was happening, as everything had seemed normal. The manager tried to avoid eye contact, his gaze fixed on the desk. Without looking up, he explained that the guests had heard rumors. Jiku's lips curled in disappointment, noticing the scabbard hanging behind the manager's back. He asked how these rumors were connected to the guide's work. Weary, the technician rested his head in his hand. Everyone in the room could tell the rumors were true. Jiku flinched when a voice suddenly came from behind him, announcing that the Angel Guild had reached the 75th floor. The people in the office turned their attention to the TV on the wall where the news anchor was speaking. The anchor reported that Angela was about to conquer the 75th floor. a feat no one had achieved before. A departure ceremony for the squad was scheduled for the next morning near the gate in Seoul. The citizens of the city were excited, as a great hero had finally appeared in South Korea. Jiku muttered to himself, reflecting on how everyone was talking about players who were, in essence, ordinary people who had never even approached the tower. Tessic responded, explaining that players were seen as idols. The gate could open anywhere, and anyone could become a player. The news anchor continued, speculating that it would be incredible if the Angel Guild truly managed to conquer the 75th floor. Jiku listened intently, his expression upset as the words on the TV screen reflected in his eyes. It felt as though the world around him was fading away, as if these conversations were from another distant world. The only sounds were from the TV, which reported that an S-rank gate had appeared in the United States. The American government was planning to make an official request to the Korean Association, promising a substantial reward to all participants. To Jiku, someone who was a true player, the world of the media and the public felt far removed from his reality. As the TV flickered off, cutting off the news anchor's words, Tessic opened his mouth in dissatisfaction. He asked why his colleague had turned off the news. The young man holding the remote didn't offer a clear answer. Handing Jiku an envelope containing his salary, Tessic praised his good work, to which Jiku responded with gratitude. Lowering his eyebrows, the manager added that although Theo seemed cold, he carried a lot of guilt, and he advised Jiku not to take it personally. Smiling, Jiku assured him it wasn't Theo's fault, and there was no need to apologize. Looking at Jiku, Tessic asked him to come in early next time to take over the shift. As he clicked the mouse button, he mentioned that another job had come in to replace this one. Upon hearing that there was a request in his name, Jiku's eyes widened in surprise. The scene shifted to a brightly lit area where green trees glowed in the sunlight. A man was introduced to Jiku, shaking his hand and introducing himself as a guide. He added that he had heard a lot about Jiku from Soku. At the mention of Soku's name, Jiku's eyes widened in recognition. Jiku asked how they were all related to each other. With a smile, Spill replied that they were cousins. The image of Soku flashed in Jiku's memory, and he smiled as he thought of his former coach. Grateful, Jiku thanked him and extended his hand. He decided it was time to introduce the members of his new team to their leader. Joyful Yuan, the chubby Sonu, and the red-haired girl Hanel stood in a line, one another. Standing in front of the squad, Jiku stated that they needed to complete the training floor in 5 days, starting today. Pointing to the forest path ahead, he explained that he would go over all the basics along the way, hoping the squad members had prepared well enough for the challenge. The sun reached its zenith as they set off. After some time, the sky turned orange with the setting sun. It was time to take a break for the day. The team stopped, and Jiku turned on the stove to cook while the others set up the tent. Hana leaned in and asked if he needed any help, but he declined, telling her to let the party rest well. The smell of meat soup filled the air as it boiled in the pot. It wasn't long before it would be ready. Hana leaned over, commenting that the dish smelled so good it seemed like a real chef had prepared it. Sitting down on one knee, Yuan asked, "Does the guide's level really never change?" Sunu, noticing his tone, shot him an annoyed look. Smiling, Jiku replied that it was true and told Yuan he could ask him anything. Yuan quickly apologized, sensing the squad leader's disapproval. As Jiku poured the soup into bowls, he asked how the squad had enjoyed the day's hunt. Sitting together, they began to discuss the day. Sunu mentioned that he still had a few scratches. Yuan said those could be healed with a potion. Hanel added that the goblins had been much easier to handle than she had expected. Jiku explained that the goblins on the first floor had poor weapons and clumsy movements, making them easy to deal with. He smiled and added that the training floor could be seen as practice for real battles. If the squad kept their vigilance up and continued to level up, they would definitely succeed. As the last bits of soup boiled at the bottom of the pan, Jiku explained that everything would be fine until they encountered the guardian monsters, huge, powerful creatures that guarded each floor. He elaborated that guardians were boss monsters, and entire guilds or large teams would usually come together to hunt them. These monsters were the strongest protectors of the gates. Furrowing his brows, Jiku explained that defeating a guardian could reward them with a lot of experience points and valuable items, but they were extremely dangerous. Low-level players would not stand a chance against them alone. Sunley and Hano exchanged worried glances, their mouths agape in fear. Jiku closed his eyes and smiled reassuringly. He told them not to be too scared, as the party would be monitoring that regeneration cycle of the guardians, ensuring they wouldn't be caught off guard. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a guild specializing in hunting the guardians of the lower floors quickly dispatched them. These monsters were difficult to find, and it was rare to encounter them here. Night fell over the border zone of the forest. On the fourth floor of the tower, a green orc dashed through the barren trees, but suddenly his foot hit a stone, sending him crashing to the ground. A second orc appeared beside him, and the fallen monster trembled in fear. Then a scream echoed through the air, and scarlet blood sprayed as the guardian orc, with glowing eyes and steam billowing from its mouth, savagely attacked his kin. It was the second day of training, and night had fallen on the second floor of the tower. The squad faced large monsters that moved slower than the goblins, making them not as difficult to deal with. On the third day, a horde of goblins and orcs appeared on the third floor, but they still couldn't work as allies. In a strategic move, someone threw a stone at the orc's head, provoking an attack on the goblins. It was the guide's idea to create a conflict between them. The squad hid behind the trees, watching the chaos unfold. The crescent moon hung in the night sky, casting a soft glow. The squad easily and safely leveled up. Sunley, now understanding why Soku had recommended him so strongly, watched as the team prepared for the night. Something caught his attention, and he asked Jik, basin with dishes in hand, what the leader of the detachment was doing. Jiku replied that he had been writing in his diary every day since receiving the invitation. Sitting by the fire, Sunpill shared that he wanted to become a ranker and write his autobiography, that he was eager to discover his class, as the only thing left to do was survive the next day and move on to the fifth floor. Wiping her face with a towel, Hanel asked what class she would receive. Sunli, brushing his teeth, muttered something incomprehensible, making everyone laugh. Meanwhile, the guide threw a stick into the fire, staring at the flames thoughtfully. The next moment, he raised his head, the moon hanging high in the sky, reminding him of the fifth floor. The wind rustled through the branches of dead trees on the fourth floor, where orcs and goblins were slightly stronger and faster than those encountered earlier. Someone suggested setting up the same trap as before. Sunley raised his sword, shouting as he swung it, landing a blow on a huge orc. Hanel swiftly stabbed a goblin with a powerful thrust, while Sonu hurled another monster away from him. Thanks to Javan's attack, the orc finally fell to the ground. Jiku watched his squad thoughtfully when something caught his attention. Placing his hand on his forehead, he squinted, trying to peer through the massive cloud of dust beyond the battlefield. He thought to himself that today didn't feel like the day the Guardian would appear. This was a bad sign. Jiku quickly grabbed his sheath, and with a wave of his hand, he distracted the squad from the battle, ordering everyone to take cover. Throwing his backpack over his shoulders, he mentally declared that real learning was never a game. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, and Jiku spun around in fear. He saw Javon on the ground, clutching his leg, with a snarling orc looming over him, swinging its club. Sunli immediately readied his sword to save his friend from certain death. The orc's head was cleaved in half with a swift strike, and blood sprayed across Javon's terrified face. In the chaos, the goblins took advantage of the distraction, and one of them managed to wound Hanel. Gritting his teeth, Jiku realized death of the entire team. As he looked back, he noticed a cloud of dust approaching. A figure loomed in the haze, and the red eye of an orc glinted through. As the dust began to settle, the guardian orc let out a fearsome roar, and its army of orcs charged into battle. Jiku cursed under his breath, frustrated by the turn of events. He gritted his teeth and raised his hand, ordering everyone to prepare to escape. He threw something toward the monsters. A smoke bomb whizzed through the air, exploding in a cloud of thick, acrid smoke, engulfing the guardian and its orc army. The squad was instructed to move quickly and retreat from the battlefield. As Jiku ran with his squad, carrying Javon on his back, he shouted that they needed to use this opportunity to break free from the monsters. The leader of the party asked where they should go. Jiku commanded them to follow him. The team arrived at the cave entrance, hidden among the steep rocks, and they decided to rest and catch their breath. Sweat dripped from their faces as they tried to recover from the chaotic escape. Sunpill, still panting, asked, "Who was that huge orc?" Frowning, Jiku replied that it was the guardian of the 4th floor, and they needed to stay alert. There was no clear reason for its sudden appearance. Near his feet lay a large bag containing plenty of supplies. As the squad settled down, Sunu shouted that Hanel wasn't coming to her senses. A deep wound marred her stomach, and the spear that had struck her was coated with goblin poison. Jiku reassured them that it was nothing to worry about, and began rifling through his bag for an antidote. His heart sank as his eyes widened in realization there was no antidote in the medicine pouch. The bag was open, and when the squad had fled the battlefield, the antidote must have fallen out. He didn't understand how he could have been so careless, but he knew one thing for sure: he needed to calm down and focus. He furrowed his brows, trying to think of a way out of this situation. Jiku knew he had to stay calm. His squad looked at him in shock as he headed toward the cave exit, telling them he would return with help. The squad members voiced their concerns, declaring that it was too dangerous and impossible to do alone. With a smirk, Jiku reassured them, saying not to worry. He had passed the training floor many times and would go up the hill to send a signal for help. Raising his index finger, he added that it wasn't for nothing that he was the first in the world among first-level players. As he crouched behind massive rocks, an orc with a club on its shoulder walked past, unaware of Jiku's presence. He thought to himself that the guardian had shifted the monsters' movements, making it impossible to predict their location. After adjusting the strap on his backpack, Jiku decided to take a different path. There was no room for error. He only had one smoke shell left. Cumulus clouds floated across the blue sky, drifting between the rocks. Jiku calculated that he would reach the hill in 3 minutes at his current speed, which meant he would have to quickly fire a flash and return to the cave. Stepping forward, he felt a growing fear of encountering that guardian, huge orc, its burning eyes glaring. Before Jiku could react, the orc lunged, delivering a crushing blow. The force of the strike sent his body flying several meters away, his back slamming into pieces of stone. Blood poured from his mouth as he gasped in pain. A smoke bomb dropped to the ground, releasing a thick cloud around the orc's body. Shaking with pain, Jiku struggled to rise, gritting his teeth as he looked back. The orc bared its fangs in anger, and Jiku knew he had to get out of there fast. Grabbing the signal pistol from the ground, he thought to himself that he couldn't fall for the same trick twice. He pointed the muzzle of the gun upward and fired, creating a bright flash in the sky. Now, he had to take advantage of the moment and run as far as possible. Blood stained his face, but he tried to stay calm. He knew this area better than anyone. However, as he tried to move, something appeared in front of him. Tracks. He opened his mouth in surprise. Standing in the middle of the dead forest was a gate, the entrance to the 5th examination floor. Memories of his sick mother and the face of Young flashed through his mind. He thought he would have gladly opened the gate if it weren't for his family waiting for him back home. But with only his first level, he knew death would be inevitable on the other side. Leaning against the gate, he questioned how he had even come to this point. Gritting his teeth, he realized that this was an escape to nowhere. Even with a 4th level, it would have been incredibly difficult to reach the 5th floor. Suddenly, the guardian lunged forward, raising its arm to strike. Jiku, his back badly wounded, faced a choice: certain death or possible death. His brows furrowed in determination. With a decisive thought, he made up his mind. He would cross the barrier and face whatever awaited him on the other side. The doors opened, revealing a source of bright light. An unfamiliar voice announced that a background check on the player had begun in the 1st examination hall had been met. Voice then revealed and tested his abilities. Jiku found himself lying face down on an endless green field, his clothes torn at the back. As he raised his head, he heard that the difficulty level had been significantly reduced. A notification popped up announcing the start of the first test, a goat hunt. The animal made a characteristic bleating sound as it moved. The young man rose to his feet, knitting his eyebrows in confusion. He asked aloud, "What's happening?" Without warning, a sword pierced the goat's neck and notifications followed, announcing the passing of the test and the acquisition of a class. The bloody goat collapsed to the ground, and new reports indicated that the quality of the reward had improved due to a perfect cleanup. Holding the sword in his hands, Jiku was stunned. He had expected to die here. Looking at the dead goat, he wondered if this was really the end of the test. Suddenly, something behind him caught his attention. Black waves descended on him stealthily, and a strange energy enveloped his body, preventing him from moving. His hand sank into the darkness. An unfamiliar voice asked, "Who are you?" Jiku opened his eyes, finding himself surrounded by emptiness. The voice continued, asking if the guest was his owner. Confused, Jiku turned his head, searching for the source of the voice. The voice sounded disappointed, remarking that the person couldn't even answer the question. The voice then asked Jiku to choose a name. He raised his head, questioning the request. Another notification appeared in the dark, asking if the player would establish a connection with Ego and to choose a name for it. As the notification faded, Jiku's eyes fluttered open. He and his friends, YJ and Tiek, stood in front of him, relieved to see him awake. The main character was lying in a hospital bed, and his sister informed him that she had already pressed the call button. Sunlight streamed into the hospital room through the blinds. Jiku had been found unconscious on the 5th floor 2 weeks ago. The manager of the conductor department waving his arms, explained what had happened. Guild players had noticed a flare in front of the entrance to the 5th floor and found an angry guardian who had managed to escape. Sitting up in bed, Jiku grew worried about the escaped guardian, but was reassured when he learned that his squad had been saved. Sunli and the rest of the team visited their guide, bringing a pack of health drinks. Jiku smiled, grateful for their support. The sun illuminated the hospital building as Jiku stood by the window, talking on the phone with his mother. Walking through the hospital corridors, he mentioned that he still needed to undergo a few more tests before being discharged. Smiling, Jiku told his mother that he was no longer a child. Worry about anything. Walking past the hospital visitors, he reassured her that the insurance covered the treatment fees and agreed with her that health was the most important thing. He placed his hand on the IV, asking his sister not to visit him anymore and to take care of their mother. He promised to call once the doctors confirmed the exact date of his discharge. After those words, he hung up the phone, looking out the window. As he gazed outside, Jiku couldn't shake the feeling that he had expected something different. After passing the 5th floor, squeezing the phone in his hand, frustration began to settle in as he realized he was still at level 1. Just then, a ring appeared on his finger. The snake-shaped ring sparkled with a red fire, catching his attention. Jiku found himself standing in front of the Korean Association building where newcomers on the 1st floor were training for battle. People looked up in surprise as a hunter arrived through the portal. Whispers spread through the crowd as they watched Jiku walk along the forest path, his backpack on his back. Newcomers looked after him, intrigued by his reputation. One person asked, "Why is this player so famous?" His friend explained that there were many rumors about a guide who couldn't raise his level. Jiku touched the gate, and a man in gloves replied that those rumors were no longer relevant. With a smile, the man added that there was another reason for his fame. Suddenly, an orc blocked Jiku's path, and his backpack fell to the ground. The man explained that this guide was known as the killer of the tutorial, causing the orcs and goblins to rush in and draw their weapons. Without hesitation, Jiku's ring ignited in red flames, and a carved demonic sword appeared in his hands. Bright red energy radiated from the blade. As he leapt into action, the monsters' mouths opened in fear. The lightning strikes of the sword cut through them one by one, leaving a trail of blazing energy. Jiku soared into the air, aiming to strike the monsters left behind. With a single crushing blow, their bodies were thrown in all directions. A malicious smile spread across his face as he remembered how Ego had asked him to choose a name for it. The monsters' bodies were sliced in half before they could react, their blood splattering across the ground. The sword sparkled with energy as Jiku made the final decisive strike. Looking at the status window, he saw that his unique ability was the power to establish a connection with Ego. While his level remained the same, Ego's level grew with each monster killed. Jiku's eyes fell on the bag full of purple stones, his next goal clear in his mind. The main character thought to himself that just yesterday he had been trembling in fear at the sight of the orcs. Now, he had the opportunity to collect crystals. Sitting in the middle of the dead forest, he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. Turning to Lu, the entity that had taken the form of the ring on his finger, Jiku reflected on how far he had come. A month ago, he had stood in a green forest, staring at the information window. That appeared in front of him, showing Ego as his class partner. Smiling, Jiku realized this wasn't a dream, and that coming to the tower right after leaving the hospital had been the right decision. He imagined his sister furiously clenching her fist and demanding to know where her brother, who had almost died, was going. Jiku couldn't help but laugh. thinking that if he returned home, now Yong would probably curse him out. Clenching his own fist, he made a decision. He couldn't just sit still. After 5 long years, changes had finally appeared in his information window. A small bird perched on a tree branch nearby, catching his attention. Jiku asked aloud how exactly to establish a connection with ego. He pressed his hand to his mouth, lost in thought. Then, an idea struck him. He raised his left hand, his feet planted firmly on the ground. Knitting his brows together, he extended his right hand forward and shouted, "Connection!" The parrot on the branch didn't move, staying silent. The bird then flew away, and Jiku noticed that his shoelace had become untied. Sitting down on the ground, he pressed his hands to his head in frustration. "I'm too excited," he muttered, relieved that no one was around to witness his blunder. Closing his eyes, he still couldn't understand how to use ego. That impudent voice had already given it a name, Lu. But how did he control it? Suddenly, a red flash burst in the air, and a flying sphere materialized before him. A voice declared. The smooth surface of the ball reflected Jiku's satisfied face. The voice continued, explaining that Lo didn't yet have a form, and because the player lacked the necessary skill, Ego's form would be chosen at random. The sphere began to glow, and the voice explained that in order to create its outer form, Lu needed to absorb the necessary materials in an unstructured manner. Looking around, Jiku was confused. What did that even mean? Without warning, streams of wind rushed toward the ball, and dark and light energy began to swirl around it. A gust of wind caught the bag with gems that Jiku had been carrying, and he shouted, trying to hold on to it. "There's no way the contents are worth that much," he exclaimed, but the wind was too powerful. His clothes began to tear as the sphere absorbed everything in its path, his bag, his clothes, even his shoes. Before Jiku could react, the wind stopped, and he found himself on the ground, his clothes completely ripped off, leaving him barely covered. He tried to keep at least his underwear intact, but the wind wasn't done. Suddenly, the energy surrounding the sphere vanished. The ball hovered above him, and Jiku could feel the intense presence of crimson energy swirling around him. A blinding flash of light erupted in the forest, causing the parrots to scatter in all directions. The main character quickly covered his face with his hand, trying to shield himself from the dazzling light. As the flash slowly dissipated, Jiku opened his eyes and widened them in sheer surprise. A black demonic sword floated in the air, its presence commanding attention. Jiku was sitting on the ground, wrapped in a woolen blanket. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the sword. He asked, "Is that really Lu in front of me?" The sword's red eye opened, confirming his question. With a sharp response, "Yes, but why ask the same thing again?" Annoyed by the repeated insult, Jiku closed his eyes, clenched his teeth, and exhaled deeply. 2 little birds watched them from a nearby branch, curious but silent. Jiku then asked, holding the sword in his hands, "What exactly are you, Ego?" He guessed it might be some kind of soul, but Lo immediately corrected him, saying, "I don't know what you mean," and added sarcastically, "Will you stop pawing at me so unceremoniously?" Frustrated with the sword's attitude, Jiku closed his eyes again and frowned. He drove the sword into the ground and asked, "Can you move on your own?" "No, I cannot," Lo responded flatly. Jiku's curiosity wasn't satisfied, and he pressed on. "Can you break the connection and change owners?" The sword responded that such a choice was only available to the owner, confirming that Jiku was the one who controlled their fate. Jiku, surprised by this, opened his mouth to ask another question. "Could you harm your owner when you can move on your own?" Lo, still stuck in the ground, answered, "Yes, I would be able to attack, but if I did, the owner's death would result in my own death as well. So, in practice, that would be impossible." A smirk crept across Jiku's face as he asked, Can you feel pain, Lu? The sword's reply was a simple yes, picking up a stone intently. If you can feel pain, then how do you feel about it? The sword's voice, now tinged with something akin to emotion, answered, I am a perfect ego, so I do have emotions and feelings. It all depends on how they are tuned. A notification appeared, asking if Jiku wanted to activate Lu's pain sensation. Jiku, a little taken aback, swung the stone over the tranquil forest. The result was not what he expected. There was a cry from the sword, a shrill sound of pain that echoed through the trees. It was a reminder that even something so powerful had its limits. With a powerful strike, the sword cleaved through the orc's body, leaving a deep cut. The blood that dripped from the wound was absorbed by the sword, and the notifications appeared, confirming that Lu had gained experience points, leveled up, and had his stats increased. As the battle ended, Jiku lowered the sword, deep in thought. He realized that his ego, Lo, had been wandering for a long time. He asked, Do you miss the old times? The sword, now back to its ring form, replied, I'm ashamed to remember them. Jiku, taken aback, stared at the ring in his hand, asking, What does that mean? The ring remained silent, its voice barely a whisper, as it added, I'm just glad my owner has such a strong aura. Jiku looked toward the backpack resting by the tree, filled with crystals from their hunt, signaling that the day's work was complete. That was a good hunt, Lo commented, sounding somewhat satisfied. Looking down at his long shadow stretching across the ground, Jiku declared, Next time we won't go to the tower, we'll go beyond the gate. However, Lo's voice responded, somewhat reluctantly, It's not time to go beyond the gates yet. The young man looked around, holding a plastic cup in his hand, and asked why. Tessik explained that 4 rankers from America had recently died in that area, believing that C rank gates were actually F rank. Looking at his colleague, the man added that rescuers were increasingly encountering strange gates that had never been seen before. This phenomenon, which started just a month ago, had never happened in the previous 23 years. The man then glanced at the manager, remembering that his meeting with Lo had also occurred about a month ago. Pushing these thoughts aside, he took a sip from his glass. Tessik, still holding his cup, raised his index finger and advised his friend to avoid the area entirely. It was far too dangerous, even with the chance to use unique abilities. With his hands in his pockets, the main character thanked his colleague. Tessik praised him and urged him to head home, calling him a tutorial killer with a smile. The player turned around, frowning, angrily asked him not to call him that. As the elevator doors opened with a distinctive clang, massive statues stood beyond the gates. There were greater rewards, pure crystals, special items, and rewards for completing various tasks. The young man pulled his phone from his pocket, his face clouded with worry. He thought about how he couldn't back out now, despite the manager's warnings. Scrolling through a list of available jobs, he reassured himself that nothing bad would happen. The odds of encountering a special gate were slim, he reasoned. He clicked on an ad for a gate hunt, and the screen displayed a number. As it connected the call, a coffee shop sign appeared on one of the nearby buildings. 2 young men sat at a table, introducing themselves and shaking hands. Sangu asked if it was the player's first time hunting a gate. The player, sitting down, nodded and replied that he was still learning the strategies. The squad leader, nodding approvingly, placed a piece of paper on the table. It was a contract that outlined a division of spoils and fines, and he mentioned that equipment would be determined by lottery. As the new recruit read through the contract, Sangu instructed him to be at Giri Station the day after tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. sharp. There was no room for tardiness. The gates were shrouded in a purple haze, and there were 2 types: one-time gates, which disappeared immediately after clearing, and continuous gates, which allowed repeated hunting. People gathered around the gates, but the continuous gates had lower rewards. However, they were already well known, and many players preferred the safer, more predictable risks. Torches hung on the stone walls, casting eerie light as someone called for the group to prepare to leave. Everyone checked their gear, and once they were ready, the squad moved forward. Through dungeon, the main character observed the others indifferently. Two swordsmen led the way, likely also part of an announcement, while a guy and a girl followed, already familiar with each other. Suddenly, something caught Xiangsu's attention, and the whole squad turned to look at him as he asked them to wait. A distant noise echoed from the depths of the dark dungeon. Taking out his bow, the squad leader announced that monsters were approaching. The undead, with their burning eyes, surged forward in a massive crowd. With a furrowed brow, Xiongwu shouted for the tank to step in. A strong-looking man raised his shield in front of the team. One of the monsters struck him, creating a dull thud as it hit. The swordsman rushed forward to attack. Lu, eager to defeat the enemies quickly, fired an arrow. From his bow, it struck one of the monsters squarely in the forehead. The swordsman's blade sank into the zombie's shoulder, but he was taken aback by how strong these undead creatures were. He swung his weapon again, pressing on despite the unexpected challenge. Suddenly, someone zipped past the main character, executing a lightning-fast series of attacks that took down all the zombies in an instant. Blood sprayed in all directions, and the tank and swordsman stood in stunned silence. Before the main character could knock another arrow, Sangu and the girl behind him supported the team, leaving everyone in awe. The squad decided to rest by the dungeon walls, catching their breath. The tank, smiling, thanked the main character for making their job so much easier. The swordsman commented that the speed and precision of his movements didn't seem like something a level 7 player could achieve. Jiayu sheepishly shrugged and admitted he was just lucky. As the squad reflected on the battle, one member remarked that they only managed to defeat the boss because of him. The blonde squad member smiled and asked to be included in the team, receiving a nervous chuckle in return. Looking back, the main character noted that the squad leader, Sangu, didn't seem overly affected by the compliment. Sangu was simply checking his arrows, but it struck the main character as a little rude to disregard the praise so casually. The allies, however, expressed their gratitude, saying they owed their lives to him that day. The archer, now ready to move out, announced it was time to continue. He gripped his sword and asked if everyone was prepared. Lo responded that zombie blood tasted horrible, and the owner remarked that the boss's room was just ahead. The squad took note of this, and the tank whispered something to his friend. They shared a quiet laugh, but the main character couldn't help but focus on the massive gate that appeared in their path. Behind it, the boss's room awaited. The young man quickly deduced that the iron bars were likely meant to imprison the boss monster. Turning to his squad, Sangu decided it was time to explain how the battle would go. Keeping a calm expression, he began. Tlin is a massive monster, but was cut off as the tank scratched his ear. We've already gone over the basics, the tank said, clearly impatient. There's no need to waste time. The squad leader frowned, continuing, beyond this gate, one mistake could jeopardize the entire team. His words seemed to irritate the blonde, who muttered angrily. The girl bared her teeth in frustration, and the squad leader shot her a stern look. With a deep breath, she calmed down. Attention was caught by something unusual. Having melted the iron bars with a special solution, the squad proceeded into the boss's room. The archer drew his bowstring, ready to release an explosive arrow. Lightning crackled through the room as the arrow struck the boss directly in the chest. The enraged monster, its eyes burning with fury, swung its massive fists toward the group. Bing Hun shouted furiously, holding his shield firm in front of the team as the boss bared its teeth and growled. The beast tried to smash through the tank's shield with a powerful punch. Meanwhile, the swordsmen charged forward, attempting to deal as much damage as possible. Their weapons slashed across the boss's body, leaving deep gashes, but the creature didn't flinch. Suddenly, the boss crouched down, covering its head with its hands. The defensive posture increased its resilience threefold, and the squad's attacks no longer seemed to have any effect. The squad leader, watching the change, shouted to Jiu, telling him to strike. With the monster's defense so high, there was a chance that a more powerful blow could cause damage. Jiu took action immediately. Leaping high into the air, he raised his sword above his head, gathering strength for a devastating attack. The tension in the air thickened as the squad prepared for the final confrontation. He raised his eyebrows in surprise when he heard the voice announce that the fusion degree with L had increased, making the use of his ego much more effective. The crushing blow unleashed a flurry of red lightning bolts, leaving the swordsman and tank wide-eyed in amazement. The notification chimed, declaring that the Guardian of the Talon Gate had been destroyed, granting experience points. The girl and the archer watched in shock as the young man struggled to believe his eyes. A new notification appeared, revealing that the cannibalism skill which restored physical strength by consuming corpses had been unlocked. The boss's body lay in the center of the room as the squad members admired their success. That's all for now, folks. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for quality recaps. Check out the comment section to watch the next part.